Hello everyone, my name is Josh and I'm a business management consultant based in Saskatchewan. And what I do is help people start, build, grow, and improve their businesses. So for startups, it's making sure that everything is set up properly. And for established businesses, that's making sure that they are operating optimally from an operations standpoint and a management standpoint. And in today's video, I'm just gonna go over my 1-hour seminar that covers all the most important steps for starting a business in Saskatchewan. Now, this is a seminar that I offer regularly with different organizations in the province. And if you need any help with any of these steps, of course, feel free to reach out. I do offer free 1-hour initial consultation, and I will leave a link to that in the video description below. So let's get started with the presentation. Okay, so getting started here, how to start a business in Saskatchewan. So for starters, this is just the fundamental steps to start a business in Saskatchewan, and it's just a brief introduction to all topics, just for general education purposes. Obviously, I could go into way more detail. That's what I do in my YouTube videos and my online course. This is just a general introduction. So a little bit about myself. My name is Josh Buchanan. I'm a business consultant for Magnaltis Consulting. From Saskatoon, I'm based here. I'm a U of S graduate. I studied business economics. I'm a former business instructor. I used to teach at SIIT. I have many different hobbies. I'm very active, playing a lot of different sports. Very experienced traveler. I have a lot of unique travel experience from around the world, which I really value. I'm a business owner, so Magnaltis Consulting is the business that I own. And I'm also a real estate analyst, which is kind of a hobby of mine that I've been doing since 2015. Now, what do I actually do as a business management consultant? I do business startup advising, so for businesses that are in the startup phase. I do formal business plan writing for any businesses that need that formal written document. I do business management consulting for established businesses looking to grow or improve. And I also provide business education, whether it be in webinars or seminars like this, or through YouTube, or through my online course that I have. And I partner with lots of different organizations in providing this education and these services as well as just doing that privately with my own clients. So a couple quick quotes here before I get into the content. The reason most people fail instead of succeed is they trade what they want most for what they want at the moment. So starting a business requires patience and it requires sacrifice. So if you want a successful business, you're going to have to delay some of that reward and gratification and just be patient. And the other quote I have is, entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't. So again, it takes patience, it takes some risk, some sacrifice and things like that, but can very much be worth it in the end. So to start with, owning a business, there are some advantages and disadvantages, and I'm just going to go over some of the quick advantages of having your own business. So things like choosing your own schedule. Do you want to work 7 days a week? Do you want to work 4 days a week? Do you want to start early? Do you want to start late? It's up to you. Do something you love. It's great now that you can turn a hobby into a business, which is becoming easier and easier. There's just so many different things that you can turn into a business. It's great learning experience. You're always learning something new. Even if you're really good in your field, when you start a business, you have to learn the business side of things. So really valuable for those who like continual learning. The next thing is there can be tax deductions and flexibility, more so than just being an employee, which can be really valuable. It can create independence, so you kind of get to do your own thing and not necessarily be responsible for other people or have to, have people above you making decisions for you. It comes down to what you want to do. Direction and flexibility. So if you start your business and you want to pivot a little bit or focus on a different product or service, that's up to you. You're in control. You own the business. Likewise, the next thing, control of decisions. Do you want to expand? Do you want to hire employees? Do you want to be open longer hours? Do you want to focus more online? You get to control those decisions. The next thing is growth opportunities. As an employee, maybe you can get a promotion, maybe you can get a raise, maybe you can move into a different business as a different employee for a different company. But with owning a business, there's not really any ceiling. There's so many different things you can do to grow your business. And then the last point here, and obviously this is not exhaustive, there are other benefits, but networking connections. So you'll meet a lot of people when you own your own business, especially if you are making the point of networking, which I think is really important if you are in that position. And even myself, I've made a lot of new good business connections and even friends just from business networking. So on the other hand, there are disadvantages to starting a business. It's not all just easy and the money just comes in and you don't have to worry about too much and you can just work, 3 days a week for 2 hours a day. Generally doesn't work like that. Some of the disadvantages, again, not an exhaustive list, but that would be things like it can be risky, especially if you're starting a higher risk business, like maybe you're starting a restaurant where you have to quit your job and borrow money and buy a bunch of equipment and things like that. It can be more work and more stress because, as I mentioned, you might be really good at your trade or very knowledgeable in your industry, but then you have to worry about the business side of things and make sure the business is set up properly and functioning properly. It is more responsibility, especially if you have employees and, as I mentioned, you're overseeing like the administrative side of the business. If you're a good carpenter and you own your own business, you're not just doing carpentry work. You are, dealing with sales taxes and income taxes and dealing with clients and quotes and stuff like that. It can be harder to get credit if you own a business, especially starting out. Lenders might not like the fact that you maybe quit your job and you're just starting a business and you don't have regular income coming in. So, if you're wanting to get a mortgage right away, maybe hold off starting that business or at least hold off quitting your job to focus on that business. It can be expensive, and I'll cover that in more detail. Some businesses are very expensive to start. Other businesses you can just start for, less than $1,000. Inconsistency and uncertainty. You're not sure, like starting out, is the business going to be successful? Is this something you can turn into a full-time thing? Is it part-time? With consistency, is it going to be seasonal? Are there going to be, busy periods and slow periods? You can't really control that, and it falls on you more so because you're the owner, you're not just the employee. Relationship issues, you can run into issues if you're going into business with friends or family members. It's one thing to be friends with someone and go for lunch with them here and there, but to live with them, to travel with them, to work with them, to start a business with them, that's a different dynamic. And a lot of businesses fail, or at least relationships fail, because of people going into business together or having business dealings together. So you want to be careful with that. And the last thing there is double CPP payment. So that's Canada Pension Plan. If you are self-employed, typically then you have to pay the employer and employee side of Canada Pension Plan. Whereas when you're just an employee, you pay your portion and your employer pays their portion for you. So next thing is requirements of a business owner. I have education and training, money, and experience. The main takeaway I want you to take from this slide is don't feel inadequate or insecure if you don't have a master's degree in business and you don't have a bunch of money and you don't have experience owning a business. You have to start somewhere. A lot of the biggest businesses that we know were started by people who didn't have a degree. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't, have experience owning or operating a business before. Of course, it depends. If you're wanting to become a dentist and own your own dental practice where you're actually practicing, then of course you're going to need that education and training. You're going to need a lot of money, whether that's your own money or borrowing it. Even then, you don't necessarily need experience owning a business. However, it could be really valuable. So the answer to just about everything in business is it depends, but don't feel inadequate if you don't have a business degree or lots of money, because there are plenty of businesses that you can start with a very small amount of money. And honestly, I feel like getting a business degree is not the best use of time and money to learn how to operate a business. You're better off just starting a business, and that's the best way to learn to operate a business is by operating a business. They don't teach you a lot of this stuff in business school. So the first step to getting your business started would be choosing a business idea. So that could be based on something you're passionate about. So maybe you really like photography and you want to start a photography business, or carpentry, or building websites, or cooking. You can start a business based on something you really like, which is great, because then a lot of times it feels like you're not even working. You're just turning your hobbies into a business. The next way you can start a business is something you're experienced in. So maybe you've been an electrician for 10 years, or maybe you've been a bookkeeper for 5 years, or maybe you've been doing graphic design for a company for a few years. Maybe you can break off and go independent and start your own business doing this, and you already know how to do the work. The next option would be a need or trend you see in the market. So maybe you see a need for daycares in your city or town, or you see a need for bookkeepers. There's a lack of bookkeepers. Or maybe you see a new trend towards using AI or using 3D printers. And maybe you never had any plans to start a business like that, but maybe you see an opportunity there and that motivates you to start a business. Now, the ways to start. Once you've chosen an idea, you can start a new business from scratch, which is what I did. So you can kind of control all the decisions and really shape the business yourself, which can be a lot more work. But if you're the type of person that wants to make those decisions and really build it yourself, then that can be a good way to do it. The next option would be purchase an existing business. So this is often overlooked, but if you're wanting to start a restaurant, maybe you can just purchase one, or some type of retail store or construction business. Sometimes people build these and then they want to get out of them. Rather than closing them, they just sell them. So this is a way to, get started in a business that's already running, that already has clients, and it can be easier just to get some momentum. But of course, it can be more expensive than starting from scratch as well. The next option would be to become a business franchisee. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with big franchises like McDonald's and Subway and A&W and Tim Hortons. Those are options as well, where you're not starting from scratch, but you're not really buying a business, you're just becoming a local franchisee. And so restaurants are really common, but also like fitness centers, moving companies, cleaning companies, salon, retail. There are plenty of different options to become a franchisee for a business that's already built. Now, once you've kind of figured out the business idea and how you're going to get started, now you can start the planning phase and, getting the business actually formally set up. So I'm going to go over some of those planning things, how to register, getting a business bank account, and then getting licensed. So step one would be develop business plans. So gather information and be strategic before making anything official. So that would be things like determining your startup costs and operating costs. How much is it going to cost you to get the business started? And then once it's started, how much is it going to cost you to actually operate it on a regular basis? You want to conduct various forms of research like, target market and rules and requirements of starting that business. You want to make sure it's feasible. Is it possible to actually start up and operate that business? Can you get the money you need? Can you find the facility? Can you find the people? Things like that. Next thing, and I'll cover this in more detail soon, is write a formal business plan or a roadmap. It's good to start documenting your ideas, how you're going to operate, how much it's going to cost you, what is your target market, what are your services or products. Next thing, maybe meet with lawyers, accountants, business consultants, just to get some help. So I have this other list here on the side there, things like choosing your timeline. When are you going to register the business? When are you going to actually open it? What is your location going to be? Is that a home-based business or do you need a facility? Make notes and do some research on your target market, suppliers, advertising ideas, employees, prices for your products and services, and then what you're offering. So, obviously you don't have to finalize everything from the start, but these are just good things to start thinking about before you actually officially register the business. So before you register the business, one thing that's really important is determining the legal structure that you want to use. And now there are quite a few options for legal structures, but I'm just going to cover 4 of the main ones. The most common ones would be actually the proprietorship and the corporation, but there's also partnership and cooperative. So you can choose any of these business structures for legal structures, and it kind of depends on your preference and the industry and the goals of the business and things like that. So the first one is called a sole proprietorship. And a sole proprietorship is an unincorporated business where there's just one owner. It's basically an individual, a human that's operating a business, and typically they are just registering what's called a trade name or a business name to them. The next option is a partnership, which is very similar to a proprietorship. The biggest difference is that a partnership is for 2 or more owners. It's also unincorporated. With a partnership, again, there's no separate legal entity. It's just 2 or more individuals operating a business, typically by registering a business name or trade name. The next option is a corporation, and I'm sure everyone has heard of that before. So a corporation is a separate legal entity. It creates separation from the owner or owners. Think of that word corp like corpse, like in English, corpse is a body. In Spanish, cuerpo. In other, European languages, the name for body is similar. So when you incorporate, you are embodying. You're creating like a new body, a new separate legal entity. It's almost like creating a new human. In some ways it is, in other ways not quite, but yeah, it's a separate legal entity from the business owners. And so things are treated a little bit differently for a corporation. And then a cooperative, which is not talked about very much, but that's another form of separate legal entity. So it is a form of corporation where there's democratic control. So meaning you don't have like shareholders where maybe you have two people owning 50% of shares or one person owning 90. Everyone who's an owner, they're basically just a member and they have equal say in the decisions of the business. So all of these can be really valuable and really useful in the right setting. It really depends on the nature of the business and the goals of the owners. So just to compare those a little bit further, the proprietorship and partnerships, which again are unincorporated businesses, they're less work to set up and to maintain. They're less money to set up and to maintain. There are fewer renewals, so you only actually have to renew the business once every 3 years in Saskatchewan, which is basically just a $50 fee, and you're just filing a short document just to keep your business name active. There's more liability because there's no separate legal entity. So a lawsuit against the business is a lawsuit against the owners. There's no separation there between individual and business. There's limited tax strategy because the income and expenses of the business are the income and expenses of the owner. Again, there's no separation there. So there's not so many options like you would have with a corporation. There still are some options though. And then limited ownership in the sense that if you start a sole proprietorship, you can't take on another business partner. You'd have to turn it into a partnership. Or if you start a partnership with two people and one person leaves, it's no longer a partnership. There are no formal share structures with this type of business, so you can't just, sell shares to someone else. So it's limited in that sense. Now comparing that to corporations and cooperatives, which are forms of, as I mentioned, corporations and their separate legal entities, those are more work and more money to set up and to maintain. So that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It can be worth it in the right situation. There are more renewals. So in the province of Saskatchewan, you're having to file renewal once per year. That's not reincorporating. It's not the same price as incorporating. It's just, as of now, a $50 fee, and you're just updating your information just to keep the corporation active. So it's not a big undertaking. There's less liability because it is a separate legal entity. A lawsuit against the corporation is a lawsuit against the corporation, not necessarily against the individual shareholders. And so it does create some separation there, which can be beneficial. There is better tax strategy, or at least more tax strategy, because it's a separate legal entity. The income and expenses of the corporation are not the income and expenses of the shareholders, the owners. It is separate. And then lastly, easier ownership. And again, in this sense, I mean, like if you start a corporation by yourself and you want someone else to take it over, you can easily sell it to them. If you want to take on a business partner, 50-50 shareholder, you can do that. Maybe if you start the corporation with 4 owners and one of them wants to leave, you can buy back shares. So it's a little bit more fluid and flexible when it comes to ownership. Next thing now, so once you've chosen your business idea and the legal structure, you want to choose a business name. Now, if you're operating a sole proprietorship, you can actually use your personal legal name if you want to. So for me, for example, if I didn't want a business name, I could just call myself Josh Buchanan, business consultant, with no business name, and then I don't have to register it. But if you are going to choose a business name, whether that's for a sole proprietorship, partnership, or corporation, there's certain criteria that the name needs to meet in order for that to get approved by the corporate registry here in Saskatchewan. So the first point and the first criteria is it needs to be distinctive. So your business name needs to have a word that separates it from other businesses. So that could be your name or a name like Classic or New Look or something like that. So just something that's different from other businesses in that field. The next criteria is that it needs to be descriptive. So what type of business is it? Is it a plumbing company, a cleaning company, a marketing company, a consulting company, coaching, whatever that might be. And then the third criteria, and this one is specific to corporations. If you have a corporation, you must include one of these legal endings. And if you don't have a corporation, you cannot include one of these. So very important to be mindful of there. Those legal endings would be things like limited, or LTD for short, incorporated, or Inc. for short, or corporation, or corp for short. And I'm sure you've seen that before in business names. So just some examples here: the distinctive, the descriptive, and the legal ending. So distinctive, again, what distinguishes it? What sets it apart from other businesses? Could be like Urban or Emily's or Classic or Paramount. And then the descriptive, what type of business is it? What is it offering? And then the legal ending in the case of corporations. So that one example I have there, Classic Plumbing Ltd. We have the distinctive, Classic, which separates it from other plumbing companies. We have plumbing to show that it's a plumbing company, so that's what it does. And then a legal ending in the case of a corporation. Whereas the next one, Urban Cleaners, again, Urban is distinctive from other cleaning companies, other cleaning service providers, and descriptive shows what the business does. So in this case, that would be a business that is not incorporated because it doesn't have that legal corporation ending. So next thing you'll probably want to do is write a formal business plan. What I tell all my clients and everyone I'm presenting to is not every business needs a super formal written business plan, but every business should be planning and documenting their plans, at least in a less formal way, for their own use. But more specifically, a formal business plan is a formal written document that contains business information, plans, projections, research, and financials. Those financials for a startup would just be projections, whereas for an established business, they would be actual recorded financials that have happened already. And I find usually these business plans are about 30 pages on average for a comprehensive one, but it can vary a lot. Some are just 5 pages long, some are maybe 50. Now, why would you actually write a formal business plan? Would be to submit to lenders to obtain a loan, would be the most common reason. Potentially to show investors, to use as a roadmap just for yourself, to refer back to show new members if you want to have members of your corporation, or more specifically your cooperative, to sign a lease. Sometimes if you are signing a lease with a landlord, especially like in a shopping mall or something, they might want some type of business plan. And just to organize your information. As I mentioned, every business should be doing planning and doing some documenting and organizing that in a way that they can look back on. Now, how do you write a formal business plan? You can write it yourself if you want to. It can be a really big undertaking. You can hire a consultant or writer like myself to write a formal business plan for you, or you can use templates. Some lenders have templates that you just fill out. And if you want to see more resources, you can check out my website. I have a resource section there, and section number 8 has a bunch of different links to different business plan samples and different templates and stuff like that. And I also have a sample of a business plan that I wrote on my startup resources section. Okay, so another thing you want to do is some market research, which I've touched on a little bit already. But some ideas for market research would be researching the industry. So find out more about the industry, the size of it, the regulations, and the trends. Different industries have different regulations, different permits, things like that. That's really good to be aware of. The next thing would be competition. So find out more about other businesses that are offering the same services. What are they offering? What sets you apart? What is their target market? What are their prices and things like that? And then you'll also want to do some research on clients. So what is your target market? Where do they live? How many people fit that demographic? What are their needs, their trends, their preferences? So there's lots of different options to research this stuff. There's like neighborhood profiles broken down by certain municipalities. Like I know Saskatchewan has a good breakdown of that. You can also reach out to the SAS Startup Institute. They offer a lot of research as well. And just online, there's so many different resources to do research these days. The next thing would be choose a location. And sometimes the order of events can change here. I do have some clients where it's really important for them to find the right location before they even start their business, because if they can't find the right facility, then there's not much point in starting that business. So again, this can vary from business to business, but generally you want to find the location, the facility, before you officially start serving clients and customers. So could be a home-based business, and with a home-based business, you could rent or buy. Home-based businesses can be more difficult for client visits, and you want to be mindful of zoning bylaws. If you are operating a home-based business, in some cases you need approval from the homeowner to get a business license. And when it comes to zoning bylaws, certain businesses cannot be run out of residential facilities or dwellings. So, you can't turn your apartment into a restaurant or a clothing store. It just won't be permitted by the municipality in which you live in. The next option would be an office. And of course, this makes sense for certain like professional services and maybe not for other businesses. But you can rent or buy. It makes it easier to have client visits. That's where I operate my business out of. So it's nice. I have a boardroom here and it's a convenient place for clients to come. Can be separate or shared. So you could rent out a whole, separate office space to yourself, or even just a small room in a shared office. That can be valuable as well. Retail. Now, if you're selling food, if you're selling clothing, if you're selling products, you want to be in a retail space. And again, you can rent or buy. Of course, signing a lease to rent is easier and less costly starting out. Again, like with all these, you want to be mindful of zoning bylaws. You can't operate retail out of all areas, all different facilities in your municipality. And then with retail, typically you want some leasehold improvements. Are you changing the electrical, the lighting, the flooring? Are you painting? Are you installing shelving or things like that? So you want to take that into consideration when looking for a space and signing a lease and calculating your startup costs. The next location and facility would be industrial. So that would be more so if you're manufacturing or doing some type of construction or something like that. Again, you can rent or buy, and zoning bylaws here are important. There's going to be some restrictions on, different types of businesses where you have to be in a certain type of facility in a certain location. And then lastly, remote businesses. So remote businesses are becoming more common where, maybe you are just a content creator, you are building websites, doing graphic design. You don't necessarily need a physical location. Maybe you spend half the year in Thailand or Mexico or something like that. And that's okay. But when you register the business, you still need to register it to a physical address. And one thing you can do too is even get set up at co-working spaces where you just kind of tag your office to there, even though you're not necessarily like operating out of there. And if you want to find, different options for facilities that are available, you can look on places like Facebook Marketplace, especially for like renting office space, or realtor.ca is good. When you go to the commercial tab, you can find not only businesses that are for sale, but commercial spaces of all types that are for lease and are for sale. And I would generally recommend getting in touch with a commercial real estate agent if you are looking to lease or purchase commercial space. So the next thing is looking at startup costs. So this is really important to do, from early on. Your startup costs are going to be things like registering or incorporating the business, getting your municipal business license, getting whatever equipment you need for the business, maybe building a website, paying for a logo to be designed, maybe some initial advertising like getting business cards, training. Maybe you need some type of specific training or your employees do. Maybe you need some consulting or legal services to help with a startup. And then, as I mentioned, leasehold improvements if you are, updating the office space that you're renting or the commercial industrial space. So once you've figured out your startup costs, you can figure out how you're going to fund the business. So is the startup cost of your business going to be $800? Maybe you can just fund that out of pocket. That's not too much money to start a business. Maybe you don't need any help. Or is that $800,000? Well, chances are you don't have $800,000 laying around and you probably will need some help. So it could come from your savings. Maybe some family and friends are willing to help. Could get a line of credit, whether personal or business. You could get more of a formal business loan. You could get investors, potentially grants, crowdfunding. And a lot of times it'll be a combination of all of these. Like maybe it's some of your savings, a line of credit, and a business loan. Now, if you are looking for a formal business loan and you're going to a conventional lender or even some of the unconventional lenders, it's really good to prepare early, be aware of what they're going to be looking for so that you can position yourself well for that. One thing too is maybe don't quit your job before asking for a business loan or line of credit. It'll be harder to get it. But in this slide, I'm just going to cover the 5 C's of credit or 5 C's of lending, which can help you prepare and understand what lenders are looking for. So the first C there is character. So if you're going for a business loan, they're going to look at your personal credit score, your net worth, your income, your experience in that field or with business. Those things all matter. The next C is capacity. So do you have the ability to repay the loan? Put yourself in the shoes of the lender. Do you want to lend to someone who doesn't look like they're going to be able to pay you back? They want to make sure that you have income coming in and that the business is viable and feasible, because ultimately they want their money back, and you would too in their position. The next thing is capital. So what is the initial investment provided? Lenders do not want to give you 100% of your startup cost. So if your business is going to cost $100,000 to start up and you go asking for $100,000, you're probably going to get rejected. They want to see that you are putting in some money, you are taking some risk. So they'll probably want to see, 25% typically is a good rough number. But yeah, it's important that you bring some of your own investment to the startup. The next thing is collateral. So that's assets to tie to the loan. So think of car loans and mortgages. Those are secured assets because there's collateral, because the loan is tied to a vehicle or a home. And typically you can get better terms and better interest rates on those types of loans because of the collateral. So not all businesses will have collateral, and that's fine, but it's something to be aware of. And again, it can get you better lending terms. And then the last C there is conditions. So they're going to look at what you're actually using the loan for. What is the state of the economy? What industry are you in? What are current interest rates? Because if the economy is slow, it's going to be maybe harder to get a business loan for a restaurant or something like that. Or if you're just using it for advertising, maybe that's less attractive than if you're using it for purchasing equipment that has good resale value. So these are the 5 C's of credit. Again, these are things that lenders are going to look at when deciding whether or not to give you a business loan. The next thing, so registering the business. This is where you're actually making the business official. So you've done all that planning. If you feel like you're ready to move forward, it makes sense, it's feasible, you feel like you can find a suitable location, then you can actually go ahead and register the business, which is typically done on a provincial level. In Saskatchewan, it's through our corporate registry, the ISC, which stands for Information Services Corporation. And you can actually just do that online. And now, in order to actually do that, first, you're going to want to choose a business name and do the name search or name reservation, which as of now is $50. And then once you have the name approved, then you can actually register your business or incorporate your business. And those are 2 separate steps. And I see people miss that step. They think that getting a name reserved means they've registered that name. You haven't registered it. You've been approved to then use that name to register or to incorporate. And the only way to really avoid reserving a name is if, again, you are operating as a sole proprietorship using your personal legal name, or if you are incorporating using a numbered name. But then you can't really market yourself under a business name if you haven't actually registered it. So $50 to reserve that name and get it approved, and then $65 to register for an unincorporated business, or $255 to incorporate. So it can be free if you're a sole proprietor using your personal legal name. You don't have to do any of this. $115 if you are registering a business name for an unincorporated business like a proprietorship or partnership. $255 if you're incorporating using a numbered name, or $305 if you are incorporating using a business name. So it's not super expensive. If you are incorporating, oftentimes it can be a good idea to meet with a lawyer to get some help. And of course, they'll charge extra for that, but you're getting legal advice. I do help businesses in Saskatchewan incorporate, so that can be a way to save money. And then I have a lawyer review things. So if you are wanting to incorporate, feel free to reach out and I can help with that. The next thing you'll want to do is set up a business bank account. So this is good to do once the business is official. If you go to set up a bank, they'll probably want to see your certificate of business registration or certificate of incorporation so that they can tie that bank account to the actual business name. It's needed if you are incorporating, because a corporation is a separate legal entity. It needs a separate business bank account, and needed if you use a different business name. So for myself, my business is a sole proprietorship, so it's not separate from me. But because I have a business name, my business bank account is connected with my business name, so that if any of my clients or customers write me a check made out to my business name, my business bank account will recognize that. And even if you don't need a business bank account, if you're just a sole proprietorship using your personal legal name, I still recommend it. It's a good idea to keep your business expenses and income separate from your personal expenses and income. It just makes bookkeeping and tracking and taxes and stuff a lot easier. And there are many different options here. Pretty much any of the major banks or credit unions will offer business banking accounts and credit cards and lines of credit and things like that. So the next thing is getting a formal business license, and this is a municipal business license. So this is completely separate from registering your business. To make your business an official entity and register it, you're doing that with the provincial corporate registry. But now, once you've done that, you get a business license through the municipality. So your town or your city. Rules can vary a lot from city to city. So you want to do some research there just to kind of see what their requirements are. Most businesses need this. Again, depends on the city. There could be some exceptions or town as well. And then you may sometimes need an out-of-town business license. So if you live in some small town and your business is registered there, but you're going to one of the bigger cities to do work, let's say you have a construction company, typically those cities will want you to have an out-of-town business license. And just as an example, the one I'm obviously most familiar with because I'm based in Saskatoon, to apply for a new business license, whether that's a home-based license or a commercial business license, it's $135 as of today. You pay that one time, and then every year you renew for $95. And in Saskatoon, you have to have one per location. So let's say you have one business and it's a restaurant, like a sandwich shop, and you have one on the north side of the city and one on the south. Even if it's just all operating under one business, you need one business license per location. So yeah, $95 per year to renew that. The next thing would be just building on licenses there. Again, that municipal business license, just about every business needs that, but some businesses might require additional licenses. So to figure that out, I have the city of Saskatoon there, but obviously check with your city, your town. BizPal is a good website. You can look that up and just put in the specifics of your business, and it will show you the types of permits or licenses you might need. But just be mindful that they're gonna throw everything at you. Chances are you're not gonna need 30 permits or licenses. For most businesses, it's maybe one or two. But some examples where you might need an extra permit would be if you're selling cannabis or selling liquor. If you have a restaurant, you'll need your SHA health permit, restaurant permit, or with a food truck. Childcare, care homes, taxis and transport, some trades. So businesses like that often need like extra permits or licenses. And then sometimes if you are operating under like a professional association, like if you're a dentist or a doctor or an accountant, you probably need to be licensed with the professional association in that field in which you're operating in. So next thing, the best part about owning a business, just kidding, taxes. So with taxes, there are sales taxes and then there's income taxes. So most businesses must collect and remit GST, which is goods and services taxes, which is a federal tax here in Canada. So that's through the CRA. Not every business has to. It depends. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but you want to look into that and make sure that you are set up if you need to be set up and that you're collecting and remitting properly. Most businesses must collect and remit PST, so that being provincial sales tax, which we have here in Saskatchewan. Again, some businesses, some services are exempt from charging this, but most businesses need to get this set up. So again, you'll want to do some research into that and just make sure that you are setting it up and collecting it and remitting it properly if you need to. When it comes to income taxes, so unincorporated businesses, they just add their business activity to the personal tax return. So on your tax return, there's a form called T2125. That's where, if you're a sole proprietorship or partnership, you just add in your revenue from business and your expenses on there. You're not filing a separate tax return. Whereas for corporations, because they are that separate legal entity, you must file a separate tax return for the corporation, which is completely separate from your personal tax return, because the income and expenses of the corporation are not yours, they're separate. If you're self-employed, you must pay CPP, which I mentioned early on in the presentation, so Canada Pension Plan. So when you file your taxes, you'll be assessed for how much you have to pay. And then EI being employment insurance, it's actually optional for self-employed individuals. So when it comes to filing income taxes, For unincorporated businesses like proprietorships and partnerships, again, that's part of your personal tax return, that form I mentioned, T2125. There's no separate fiscal tax year. So your business tax year is your personal tax year, which is just the start of January till the end of December each year. And then, of course, go ahead and file your taxes in March or April. Income tax for your business is taxed at your personal tax rate. So if you have whatever $50,000 in business revenue and $30,000 in expenses your first year, you have $20,000 of net income, and that $20,000 of net income is just taxed at your personal marginal tax rate. You want to claim all your business expenses as well. For filing your own taxes, of course, you can hire someone to do that, but there are options like Wealthsimple and TurboTax where you can file your personal taxes, and then they have those extra sections to add your business activity into as well. Now, when it comes to filing taxes for corporations and cooperatives, again, that is a separate tax return from a personal income tax. It's called a T2 form rather than a personal T1. With a corporation, one nice benefit is that you can change your fiscal year if you want to. It doesn't necessarily need to be January till December. You know, if you're doing snow removal or something where you're really busy in the winter months and you don't want to worry about your taxes in February, March, and April, you could make your tax year, your fiscal year, start July 1st, for example, if you want to. Income tax is not taxed at a personal rate, it's taxed at a corporate rate. And now from there, from the corporation, that income stays in the corporation. You have to find a way to get it out if you want to. So to get it out, you can pay yourself as an employee, like you can set up a payroll account and be kind of a regular employee. You can leave it in the corporation if you want to, or you can pay yourself as an owner through what's called dividends. Or it can be a combination of these. Maybe you are an employee, you're also taking out dividends. Maybe you even loaned the corporation some money, so you're getting paid back as a shareholder loan. So there's more options when it comes to that type of stuff with a corporation. And again, claim all business expenses. So my general attitude towards this is claim every single thing you can that is legitimately for business. Now, when it comes to accounting and bookkeeping, it's really good to develop good habits early. I know a lot of people don't like this, they're not familiar with it, numbers can be intimidating, but it's really important to educate yourself and get off to the right start, because if you neglect this, it can come back and create huge headaches for you in your business later on. So just, get educated and, get off to the right start with those good habits when your business is small and simple starting out. So research and seek advice. There's lots of great videos on YouTube, educational courses. You can speak with experts, bookkeepers and accountants to get help. So inform yourself and be strategic and use appropriate software, where necessary. Not everyone needs software like QuickBooks, FreshBooks, Sage, or Xero. Sometimes you can just use like a Google spreadsheet or a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, especially for businesses that don't have a high volume of transactions. Whereas if you work in retail or you have a restaurant and you're having, maybe 100 or more transactions per day, putting that into a spreadsheet probably isn't ideal. And last point there is don't guess or do more than you're comfortable with. Again, it's worth it just to hire an accountant or bookkeeper, at least to review things for you. Even if you're doing it yourself, just get that expert outside set of eyes just to make sure you're on the right track. And the last thing I have added there is Avalon. Avalon is the name of an accounting firm in British Columbia, and they have a YouTube channel where they share lots of good tips and advice on accounting for businesses and bookkeeping as well. Okay, so the next thing here, if you are considering hiring employees, there's some things you need to be mindful of and aware of. You want to choose job descriptions. What are you actually hiring for? What do they need to do? You want to be aware of advertising and recruiting methods. Are you posting on job sites like Indeed or SAS Jobs or the Government of Canada Job Bank? You'll want to determine schedules and compensation for your employees. You'll probably want to have formal employment contracts and some training systems in place. You'll also need to set up a payroll account with the Canada Revenue Agency and then take off the proper deductions like income tax, federal and provincial, CPP and EI, and then workers' compensation as well. If you have employees or independent subcontractors that are coming to your work site or your workspace, you will likely need workers' compensation. And workers' compensation is basically insurance for workplace injuries, again, required for most businesses who have employees or subcontractors, and that's issued provincially through the Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board. So next thing is insurance, and this is separate from workers' compensation insurance. So there are some businesses that might not need any insurance. There are some businesses that'll need various different types of insurance, but most businesses will need something at least. And some of the main types of business insurance that you might want to look at or get for your business would be like business interruption insurance, property insurance, professional liability insurance, vehicle insurance, and maybe even employee health insurance. So business interruption insurance can protect you if for whatever reason the business is interrupted and you can't operate it. Property insurance, maybe the commercial landlord has insurance, but you still probably want that for your specific unit and your belongings in there. Professional liability insurance, that's more for professional service providers, so like errors and omissions insurance, it's called. Vehicle insurance if you have a commercial vehicle or want to get an extra commercial pack for your private vehicle, personal vehicle. And then employee health insurance, so that might be getting some extra health benefits in spending accounts and stuff like that for employees if you have them, or even just for yourself. Now lastly, some extras that I used to cover in more detail, but just for sake of keeping this presentation a little bit short, I'll just review them quickly. You might want a company logo, not necessary. Some businesses care a lot more about branding, and so that can be good to have. There's different websites like Vistaprint that have logo generators. You can hire people locally or through websites like Fiverr. Company colors can be important. Again, if you care about branding, I think that is important. Google Business Profile, I think, is very important to have. That's where you can be found. It puts you on the Google map. That's where you can share your hours and pictures and services, and people can leave reviews. And Google Business Profiles are especially important if you want to be found locally, especially if you have a retail store or restaurant or something like that where you want to be found. Company websites, not every business needs a website, but I think it's really important. Some businesses completely depend on their website, so good to have, and there's a lot of options available these days, even if you want to make your own. Business cards and advertising are important, of course, and you can do that in multiple different methods. Networking I find to be really important. If you own your own business, it's important to network with other business owners, other service providers, both for yourself, but also for your clients and customers. Social media accounts can be really valuable too. Again, it depends. Not every business needs social media and a website and a Google Business Profile to be successful. But in a lot of cases, it's good. It creates, more credibility online. It's a way for you to kind of showcase what you're doing, show your services and products, develop a following, things like that. And then lastly, it can be important to join different business directories. There are various different ones that you can join. That can be valuable both so that you can be found online in various different forms, but also just like sending backlinks to your website just to show your website is more credible. So if that seems overwhelming, you don't know where to start, well, that's what I help with. So I very much specialize and focus on helping businesses with a startup phase, and have built a lot of connections with different individuals and organizations like lenders, lawyers, accountants, and bookkeepers, commercial realtors, different institutes and economic development organizations, insurance companies, and networking groups. So if you need any connections with those, I can help get you connected. And if you need help just with the general startup process, again, that's what I do. And I do offer a free 1-hour initial consultation where you can book that and we can discuss kind of where you're at and what your needs are. I also am on YouTube here. As I mentioned, I have, as of today, about 200 videos that cover business management and business startup topics that you can check. And then just some useful resources here. So for startups, SAS Startup Institute is good. And then myself, Magnaltis Consulting, we both focus a lot on helping startups. Depending on the demographic here. So for women, there's organizations like Women Entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan, which is WESC. There's the Women's Business Hub here in Saskatoon. And there's CECS, which also helps women entrepreneurs. For Indigenous entrepreneurs, there's Clarence Campo Development Fund, there's Gabriel Dumont Institute, there's the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology, and there's the Saskatchewan Indigenous Enterprise Foundation. For cooperatives, there's an organization called Cooperatives First that can be really helpful for starting a cooperative. They have lots of resources and support there. If you want to learn, YouTube, Skillshare, both of those platforms and other platforms have lots of videos on learning everything around starting a business, even designing a website, different things like that. And for connecting, I would recommend checking out certain websites like Chambers of Commerce, Eventbrite, different kind of startup and economic organizations. They often post events for networking and education. And then lastly, I did mention I have a startup course online. This is now free. So this course goes into a lot more detail than this presentation. This presentation is roughly an hour. With this course, I go into much more detail on all these topics and have more videos and tutorials and resources. So feel free to check out that online course. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it's a lot of content and it's very condensed. Really that's 10 plus hours of information I'm trying to fit into 1 hour. So if you want to learn more about that stuff, feel free to check out my YouTube channel here, where I currently have about 200 videos that cover business management and business startup topics. Again, you can reach out for a free initial consultation with myself with the link in the video description, and also check out my free online course on how to start a business in Saskatchewan that goes into more detail, and I will also leave a link to that in the video description.